A real sword carriage that holds 3 katanas. That being said, there are a lot of flaws, obviously, with having dual-wielding 2 full-length swords, as Zoro does. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Screen Tested. Today we're going to be taking a look at Zoro's 3-sword carrying method, actually carrying 3 full-size swords on your belt. Is it possible? Is it practical? And can it actually work? And we may even touch on Zoro's 3-sword style, where obviously he's using, dual blades, but at the same time he puts one in his teeth. Now I want to make this clear from the outset. Today's episode is more so for the fun. I'm actually creating it more for one of my younger brothers, who's a really big Zoro and One Piece fan, and recently I actually purchased him one of the Zoro sword toys for his birthday. So nothing too serious, nothing too crazy, but there probably will be some useful information here, especially about carrying 3 full-size swords on your belt. So with that being said, let's get started with today's episode. So just before we actually create our 3-sword carrying method, I thought it would be worth discussing the actual live action aspect of this. Obviously it is a movie/TV show production, right? They're not necessarily going to be using real steel katanas, solid wood sayers, all that sort of stuff, pretty much nearly 100% of the time. Reason being, there's not really a purpose to it. For the most part, you don't want your actor to get injured, you don't want your stuntmen to get injured, and you can actually see this in a lot of the scenes, right? When Zoro is running and moving around, the sayers that are still on his belt are very floppy, and that's because, you don't want to trip over it, you don't want to hit things. We can see them flex and bend. So for the most part, a lot of the swords that you're seeing in the show are, prop sword. But then when it comes to like the close-ups, those hero shots, they might have something like an aluminum katana, which are very, very, very lightweight. I've used them before. They're very nice, they look good on camera, but again, they're not really comparable to real proper steel, swords. With that being said, let's actually make our sword frog. Now, I've actually made a sword frog before, one that was way better in terms of its quality. It was a proper one that I actually use. I'll leave a link to that video down below. For this one, I'm just going to be making something super simple. I cut out a long rectangle of leather, essentially. Then I just laid down my blades and started wrapping it around to try and get the right amount of tension on all of the loops so that each katana could fit through. Made some holes for the leather rivets, and then just riveted all of the leather together and essentially repeated that process 3 times over so that we could fit 3 katanas. Super simple sword frog, but it should be perfect for our application today. A real sword carriage that holds 3 katanas, exactly the same as Zoro. Now, what do I think of this? Honestly, it's not as bad as I originally thought it would be. Now, it's not good. I want to make this very clear, right? A frog or a sword carriage, or just like, something to attach a blade to a belt. Usually you want 1 blade. And maybe if you want like a second blade, right, you're going to have something a little bit shorter. 3 full-length blades on one side does mean, obviously, it does, it has a lot of weight concentrated here. If I'm running around with this, if I'm moving around with this, you can see that this thing is kind of wild. So if I was to say the general weight of a katana, let's say 1.2 kilos. That's what this particular blade here is, and even this particular blade here. So obviously 3 blades means that you're getting it around about 3.6 kilos. I'm not sure what that is in freedom units. I shall put it here so you guys know the conversion. That's kind of a lot of weight to be hanging from your hip like this. Now, it's not necessarily a heavy weight, but it is a heavy weight when you're talking about something like a sword, right, which disperses it over a large area. Then you have it all at one connection point, so 3.6 kilos right on this little connection on your belt, which then needs to, you need to support essentially when you're moving around. It means that actually moving with this sort of, sword configuration, it's not terrible, you can do it, but it's not ideal at all. It is much more preferable to carry a full-size blade and then maybe a shorter blade or a parrying dagger, that sort of thing. But you can do it. Moving in it is not the most comfortable. It's obviously a lot of weight here, but technically speaking, I do think it is possible. albeit a little bit unwieldy, obviously, right? However, something that I do really like, a little detail that they have in the show, is that when the actor and when they're actually doing the fight scenes with Zoro, when he's only using 1 or 2 blades, he is removing the lowest blades on the actual, you know, the frog here. I really like that because it means that he's actually concentrating the weight further back up. So the more blades that he pulls out, right, becomes essentially like a regular sword frog, meaning it's not going to be completely, you know, unbalanced like it would be if you had all the blades. Because conventional wisdom might think that, you know, if you have 3 blades, the first blade that I'm going to grab is the one closest to me. But actually, the best one to grab is the furthest one. Because if you have all of that weight, for example, all of that weight further away from your hip, all of a sudden that is going to start swinging around uncontrollably. So it's actually a very small detail that I like, that he essentially pulls out the furthest blades first. But let's talk a little bit about how Zoro uses the blades in some of the shots, right? I don't actually mind it too much. He essentially has one forward, and then I've seen him do some reverse edge stuff. Now, reverse edge stuff with a, you know, full length blade, I've done a full episode breaking this down. Check it out if you are interested. But in this particular configuration, because he does have a blade that is essentially pointing forward, I'm a little bit more forgiving of it. That being said, there are a lot of flaws, obviously, with having dual wielding 2 full length swords as Zoro does. But let's discuss. If you're enjoying today's episode, you should really consider subscribing. I'd appreciate it. Dual wielding 2 full-size swords. It is honestly a little bit unwieldy because you have a lot of weight and a lot of mass here. Obviously, having something like a parrying dagger in that second hand to be able to use your main blade, it's far more preferable. But because katanas are a little bit shorter than, I would say, you know, long swords, right? I don't actually hate it too much, but I don't necessarily think it's the most practical, obviously. Then we get into Zoro's party trick. I hate it. I mean, this one should be obvious. Putting a blade into your mouth, a full-size steel blade, 1.2, 1.3 kilos, that sort of deal. When you put this blade in your mouth, all of a sudden, all that, you know, weight is wanting to pull down on your neck. And I have thought about this. I do think it is possible, not obviously not to fight with a bloody sword in your mouth, but in terms of the neck muscles, there are things like F1 drivers who have huge, insane, you know, muscles in their necks to be able to combat the G-forces. So I do think that there is training that you could do that could actually strengthen certain muscles to not make this technique terrible, but obviously you're never going to be fighting with a blade in your mouth. I mean, that's just obvious, right? This is actually really, really difficult to do. Just with this, like the real blade. That's incredibly difficult. That's really, really hard on the teeth. But in terms of the actual, you know, sword frog itself, I'm actually really surprised that it's not as uncomfortable as I thought it would be. I also thought it would be worse than this, right? I thought it would be, like, it's not good, but if I just hold the center blade, I feel like I have so much more control and maneuverability over the 3 blades, right? And so, funnily enough, I think it's a little bit more practical than I originally was going to give it credence, but it's still obviously not ideal. 3 full blades, not really the best. And one of the biggest issues is, right, like if I want to grab this bottom katana, I'm kind of like, give me a minute, guys. Let me get all the way down here, down low with it, you know? Like, it's not ideal. And then the second blade. Sayers get in the way of things. Let's see if I can put him back. Like, yeah, I guess that's kind of something, isn't it? Give me some credit here. Like there's water on my blade. Zoro style. Works. Confirmed. Not really. That was terrible. Because I know that if I had a blade like that and somebody just went like this, you'd like smash my teeth. It would f you up so bad. I think that's enough on the sword style itself. Using 3 blades, obviously it's a little bit much, right? Using one in your mouth, I mean, putting a sword in your mouth, I don't know, ask your girlfriend about that. But for real swords, steel swords, putting one in your mouth is not a good idea. You're gonna smash your teeth out, and that is f***ing hard, right? Like, there's no way. We all know that, that's okay. But in terms of actually, you know, carrying 3 blades, I'm more impressed with it. Let's go for a walk. Let's just see how it goes when I explore yonder. So the one thing that I noticed when I was watching a lot of the live action Zoro fights is that there is suspiciously not much blood and gore going on. Now, I get that it's a TV show, but when you're fighting that many people in a bar, you are going to be drenched essentially by the end of it. So I thought it would be fun to take one of these live blades to a human type target to show you what it can actually do to the human form. So let's go do that. Let's see what a katana does to a ballistic head. You can see his brains, yes? That is a sight to behold, huh? So Zoro's 3-sword carrying method and technique. In terms of the carrying method, it's far more realistic and practical than I really thought it would be. It's not good, it's not ideal. It's kind of heavy, it's a little bit unwieldy, but you can do it. You actually can functionally do it. Would it be the most practical? No, but I do think that if you kind of optimized the actual sword frog itself and made it a little bit better, then you could probably actually make it even more practical and more functional. This was just like a very basic one I threw together that would be functional. So in terms of the carrying method alone, I'm actually thoroughly impressed, and I think they did a good job on the TV show actually, because the one that I saw in the TV show is better than my one. In terms of the 3 technique style, I mean, come on, it's anime, it's fantasy, it's fun, it's unique, it's memorable, and it's cool, but obviously not really that practical, especially the teeth thing. You know, nobody likes teeth on their sword. Let me put it that way. Nobody. But that is gonna be all. Thank you guys for watching. I genuinely hope you enjoyed. And as always, I will see you next week in another episode. Have a good one.